You are building 2 walls and filling the gap with junk? You'll freeze before winter's over.
David didn't look up. He just kept building, stone by stone, with the calm of a man who'd stopped caring what the town thought. His hands moved with quiet certainty. Each stone clicked into place. He poured a bucket of broken rock and gravel into the cavity between the 2 walls. 2 thin walls, a hand width apart, rose from the frozen ground. The gap was filling with rubble.
Wasting good stone. That wall won't last a single hard season.
David packed the rubble tight, filling every void until the mass was solid. A cold gust sliced down from the ridge, the first real bite of winter.
This is just the start. Wait till the deep cold hits. Then you'll see.
David pulled his collar tight and kept pouring. The wall was half done, but it already felt heavier than any cabin the valley had known. The cold was just getting started. Days passed. David capped the wall with a final course of stone, sealing the rubble inside. The cabin was complete.
2 walls, 1 fill. Now, let's see what the cold makes of it.
He built a fire inside, and the warmth spread through the room. No draft, no seepage, just still, dry heat.
Pretty fire. Won't mean much when the real cold hits.
Jack trudged on to his own house, a thin-walled wooden cabin that already felt colder than the air outside. David ran his palm over the stone wall. Cold to the touch, but no wind slipped through. Night fell hard. Temperatures dropped. Frost crawled up the window panes of Jack's house.
Another night feeding the stove, just to keep from shaking.
In David's cabin, the fire burned low, but the room stayed warm. The stones radiated the day's heat back into the space. Night fell. The temperature plunged. David's wall stood ready for its first true test. Dawn came, and David's cabin was still warm. He dropped a single split log onto the red coals across the valley. Jack woke to a cabin that felt like a tomb. The stove had died in the night. David poured a tin of coffee and sat by the hearth, reading. No blanket needed. Jack bundled himself in every shirt he owned and worked the flint with numb fingers, trying to restart his fire. The secret was in the rubble core. It drank the heat from the flames and released it slowly, long after the fire dwindled.
No magic, just mass.
He just got lucky with the weather. That's all. A fluke.
While David's cabin held its heat, Jack's thin walls let every whisper of warmth escape into the frozen morning.
The cold can throw itself at these walls. They won't give an inch.
Wait till the real winter hits. Then we'll see whose luck holds.
For 5 nights, David fed his fire, a single armload, before sleep. Each morning, the cabin held its warmth. Jack's stove consumed 3 times the wood, and still the walls stayed cold to the touch.
It's not the fire, Jack. It's the walls.
Warmth is fire. Stone holds cold. Always has.
The rubble soaks up heat, then gives it back slow, like a cellar stays cool in summer.
Nonsense. A wall's a wall. You got lucky with the weather, nothing more.
By midday, the sky had gone flat and gray. A rider galloped through, shouting warnings no one could ignore. David spent the rest of the daylight stacking firewood and covering it with oilskin. He checked every seam in his wall.
That'll do. Storm's overblown. Same as his walls.
As darkness fell, the temperature plummeted. David's wall was ready. Jack's thin pine cabin was not. The wind hit not like a gust, but like a wall. Snow erased the world in seconds. Inside David's cabin, the storm was a distant rumor. The fire whispered. The walls held the silence. A shutter ripped loose and cartwheeled into the dark. Snow poured through the gap like cold smoke. Jack crammed old shirts into the cracks, but the wind found new ones. The thin walls offered no resistance. By the stove, Jack fed in broken chair legs. The fire was a weak orange fist, losing the fight.
He's over there freezing in that pine box, but pride is a colder thing than weather.
Another gust slammed the cabin. The whole structure groaned and leaned, timbers creaking like a ship in rough seas.
He's warm in his two-walled fortress. I will not crawl to him.
Outside David's cabin, the snow plastered the stone walls, searching for a crack. It found none.
I will not give him the satisfaction. Not yet.
The window blew inward in a shower of glass and ice. The stove hissed, then went dark, leaving only the howl of the storm. The cold was a physical blow, stripping warmth from Jack's skin in seconds. He had minutes, maybe less.
Move. Reach the stone cabin, or freeze here, alone in the dark.
He wrapped the blanket around his head and stumbled into the whiteout. The wind nearly took him off his feet, pushing him sideways. Snow blinded him. He fell twice, crawled up, fell again. David's light was a distant orange flicker, threatening to vanish.
Just a few more steps. Don't stop. If I stop, I die.
His legs gave out at the door. He pounded once with a numb fist and collapsed. David wrenched the door open and found a snow-caked figure on his threshold. He didn't recognize him at first.
Jack, get yourself inside. You are half frozen.
He hauled him in and slammed the door. Jack collapsed by the fire, shaking, refusing to meet David's eyes. Jack's hands steadied around the tin of hot tea. The warmth crept back into his fingers slowly. He stood and placed a palm flat against the stone wall. Not a whisper of draft. The stone was cool, but the air on this side was still.
The rubble soaks up the fire's heat like a sponge. Then it gives it back, hour after hour. No wind can push through that mass.
I've lived in this valley 40 years. Never been in a cabin this quiet during a storm.
Outside, the wind screamed with new fury. But inside, the stones held their counsel. The room felt sealed off from the world. Suddenly, a sharp crack, louder than thunder, split the air. Jack flinched, tea sloshing onto the hearth.
What was that? That wasn't just wind.
Old dead pine. The storm's trimming the forest. Nothing to worry about here.
But the next crack came from a different direction, followed by a grinding groan that sounded too heavy for timber. Jack's eyes darted toward the shuttered window, fear flickering back into them. David simply added another log to the fire. The storm screamed at full throat, shaking the cabin with a single deep tremor. Then the walls settled, silent and unyielding.
My house. It won't survive this, will it? I built it with my own hands, but it was never strong enough.
Number, a single pine wall can't take this. The wind finds every crack and bleeds the heat right out.
Jack lowered his head. The fight drained out of him, leaving only the weight of a hard truth.
I was a fool. I mocked you for weeks, and you never raised your voice once.
You didn't know. Now you do. That's all that matters tonight. Rest now. We'll see what's left at dawn. No sense borrowing grief before the sun rises.
They fell into silence. The fire sputtered, the only sound inside as the gale clawed at the shuttered windows. Jack leaned against the stone, and for the first time, he felt the deep, steady warmth radiating from the wall. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, the walls kept their silent watch. Dawn was hours away. Jack could not sleep. The howl of the storm filled the cabin, and each distant crash felt like a verdict on everything he had built.
I built that house with my own hands. Every plank, every nail, it was all I had.
The house didn't fail you, Jack. The method did. A single wall against this kind of cold is like a sail in a hurricane.
If it's gone, I don't know how to start over. I am not a young man.
With 2 walls and a rubble core. I'll show you. We'll build it together, stone by stone. It'll be stronger than any cabin in this valley.
Jack looked at David, and for the first time since the window shattered, something besides fear flickered in his eyes.
Maybe I don't have to lose everything.
The wind outside screamed, but the wall behind them did not shudder. It stood as a silent promise of what could be. They shared the blanket without a word, 2 men on opposite sides of a lifetime of habit. Now bound by a single wall's defiance of the cold, sleep finally came, not from comfort, But from the deep certainty that these walls would not fail, dawn was still a long way off. The storm's voice fell from a shriek to a low moan, then to an uneasy silence broken only by the creak of dying timber. Jack woke slowly, listening. The walls no longer shuddered, just the whisper of spent wind dragging across the roof.
It's quiet, too quiet. The wind just stopped.
It's over. The storm's spent.
A gray seam of light appeared beneath the door, widening as the sun crawled over the frozen mountains. The blizzard had spent its fury. Outside, the world lay buried under a silence deeper than the storm that caused it.
Get your coat. We need to see what's left.
Jack pulled on his boots with trembling hands. He did not speak. Standing at the door, they paused. David unbolted the heavy oak plank but kept the door closed. He looked at Jack. Beyond that door lay either ruin or reprieve. They would learn the truth in a single breath. The world beyond the door was a frozen battlefield. Trees lay shattered, snapped like dry tinder. The neighbor's shed was a splintered memory. Amidst the wreckage, David's stone cabin stood untouched. Not a stone out of place, the snow around it sculpted, but harmless. They trudged through drifts up to their knees, each step toward Jack's land a slow, dread-filled march. Then Jack saw it. His house, a heap of broken boards and shattered glass, half buried in the white. Jack fell to his knees, a wordless sound torn from his throat. His hands dug into the cold snow as if he could pull his home back together. David placed a hand on Jack's shoulder. No words, just the weight of shared silence.
I built it with these hands, watched it stand for 20 winters, and now, nothing.
The proof was irrefutable. A single wall was no match for the mountain's fury. Only David's double-walled cabin stood defiant. Slowly, Jack rose to his feet. His tears had frozen on his cheeks, but his gaze was fixed on the salvageable stones scattered among the ruin. He did not speak of rebuilding. Not yet, but the thought had planted itself deep as a root in frozen ground. After a long silence, Jack turned to face David. The broken timber lay behind him, but his voice found a rough strength.
I should have listened. You tried to tell me, and I was too proud to see what was right in front of me. Show me. I want to learn. Show me how to build a wall that won't fall to the next storm.
David didn't answer with words. He bent, picked a heavy stone from Jack's wreckage, and held it between them.
We'll start with the foundation. 2 walls, a hand-width apart. That gap is where the magic happens.
Jack wiped his eyes with a sleeve and began sorting the scattered stones by size. The first small act of a long labor. Together, they cleared a patch of ground, shoveling snow and broken timber aside until the frozen earth was bare. David marked the footprint of the new cabin with the tip of his boot, a faint line in the cold soil.
This time, Jack, the cold won't get through. I promise you that.
Jack looked at the line, then at the stones, and for the first time since the storm, his hands were steady.
Inner wall, outer wall. The space between them is where the rubble goes. That's the heart of it.
Jack placed his first stone for the new wall. His hands, still raw from the cold, trembled with the weight. He tipped the first bucket of rubble too fast. A cascade of broken stones spilled over the edge before David's hand gently stopped him.
Slow and steady. Let it find its own level between the stones. That's where the strength comes from.
His knuckles split and bled against the rough stone, but he did not stop. Each stone felt like a small penance for 20 winters of thin walls.
You are getting it now. The wall's already straighter than half the sheds in this valley.
By week's end, a section of wall stood 3 feet high. The double withes ran true, the gap between them, a perfect hand width, waiting for its fill.
I never thought I'd build something like this. Never thought I'd want to. But you were right, David. It's different.
Now you know. And next winter, you'll be the one drinking coffee while the wind screams outside.
The wall was only half done, but already it felt heavier than any timber frame. The rubble core inside was a promise yet to be tested. A bitter cold front rolled in overnight. Jack crouched behind the 3-foot wall and the wind simply vanished.
It's like a different day back here. No wind at all.
The stones hold the sun's heat. At night, they give it back slow.
Jack hovered his hand near the stones. Not a whisper of chill.
All my life, I built wrong. Every wall I raised was paper in the wind.
Now you know better. That's all that matters.
The rubble core was doing exactly what David promised, soaking up warmth by day and guarding it through the night.
It wasn't luck. It was right there, and I couldn't see it.
That evening, as the cold deepened, Jack looked at the wall with new eyes. He would never build a single wall again. The proof was solid as the stone itself. Jack set the last capstone with hands that no longer trembled. The double wall was finished, from foundation to top stone.
It's solid. Even a castle couldn't do better.
They laid salvaged timbers for the roof and packed the gaps with moss and mud. A simple shelter, but strong. Jack moved a narrow bed inside and lit the first fire. The walls smiled back with steady warmth. By dusk, a spring storm rolled over the peaks. Snow cut sideways, filling the tracks they had just made.
Go on, David. I'll stay here tonight. These walls need to prove themselves.
David gave a single nod and pulled the door shut. The latch clicked, and Jack was alone. He sat by the hearth, feeding split pine into the flames. The wind outside rose to a howl, but the walls did not answer. Not a draft stirred the flames. The stone held their heat like a promise. Outside, the storm raged, but inside, a hard-won peace settled over the cabin. Dawn broke clear and bitter. Jack pushed open the heavy door of his new cabin and stepped into the silence. The walls stood exactly as he'd left them. No cracks, no fallen stones, just solid, silent strength. He ran his bare hand over the frozen stone. Not a whisper of draft. Every seam had held. The rubble core had done its work, and the cold had not found a single weakness. He found David outside, already stacking firewood. A knowing smile played on his face.
It held, David. Every bit of it. Not a draft, not a chill.
I told you, 2 walls. 1 fill. It's the only way.
But where did you learn this? I've seen plenty of stonework, but nothing like this.
David set down his axe and met Jack's eyes. The secret he carried was centuries old. He motioned Jack inside. It was time to show him the truth behind the method. Inside, David pulled a worn leather tome from a shelf. Its pages were yellowed and fragile. He turned to a page with a cross-section of a castle wall. 2 outer layers, a stone fill between.
700 years ago, they built strongholds that still stand. 2 wythes, rubble core, same as my cabin.
Castles used a rubble core. I always thought they were solid stone.
Solid stone would crack under a battering ram. The rubble absorbs the shock. It was built for siege.
And you just used the same idea for a cabin.
Same wind, same cold. Why would the solution be different?
Jack turned the brittle pages. Engravings of massive fortress walls, their cores packed with the same small broken stone. The wisdom was older than any man in the valley, and it had saved his life.
He didn't just build a wall, he reached back across centuries and pulled the answer out of the stone.
Jack gently closed the ancient book, its leather cover warm from the fire. The wisdom inside was no longer a mystery.
All those years I built houses that would never last more than a single winter. You didn't just build a wall. You saved me from freezing, and you saved my pride.
You saved yourself by listening. That's more than most men ever do.
David took the book and set it on the rough-hewn table. The old knowledge had found a new keeper.
I'll make sure everyone in this valley knows how to do this. No more thin pine shacks.
That's all I ask. Pass it on.
Jack reached out his hand, and David clasped it without hesitation. In that grip, a promise was sealed, stronger than any mortar or stone. Outside, the snow began to melt under a warming sun. The valley would learn. Jack stood beside a young farmer, showing him the 2 wythe method. The gap between the walls waited for its rubble fill. Month by month, new cabins rose from the frozen ground, each one with the telltale thick walls. When winter returned, the village was quiet and warm. No more drafty nights, no more frantic feeding of stoves. Children laughed and tumbled in the fresh snow, and inside every stone home, a single log kept the hearth glowing. Jack's old house was a distant memory, its broken timbers long buried. His new cabin stood as a monument to a lesson learned. The valley seemed sturdier than ever, each cabin a silent fortress against the mountain cold. David watched from his porch, his quiet revolution complete. The method had spread like wildfire through dry timber. The knowledge passed from hand to hand, as old as castles and as simple as stone. And when the next blizzard howled through the peaks, not a single wall failed. The cold never once got through. One winter evening, Jack set a plate of stew and bread before David. The wind was beginning to rise. They sat by the fire in his stone cabin, the thick walls already radiating a quiet, steady warmth.
I found another page in that old book of yours.
He pulled the worn leather tome from a shelf, flipping it open with a rough smile.
2 walls, 1 fill, forever still. That's what it said.
They forgot to mention the cold never gets through. But I suppose we proved that ourselves.
They raised their tin cups, the firelight catching the steam, a silent toast to the storm outside. Outside, the wind clawed at the shutters, but inside the sound was a distant whisper. The walls had kept their promise, and so had the men who built them. The cold could howl all it wanted. It would never get through again. David pulled his coat tight and stepped into the moonlit snow, his lantern carving a path. He walked alone, the taste of stew and friendship still warm in his chest. Halfway up the ridge, he paused and looked back. The valley below was scattered with golden windows. Each light marked a stone cabin, thick walls, a fortress against the cold. Smoke rose from chimneys, straight and true, promising deep warmth within. He allowed himself a rare smile. The knowledge had spread. Turning, he followed the path to his own cabin, a dark shape against the stars. Inside, the banked fire still glowed red. He did not need to add a log. He sat by the hearth, the walls radiating a steady, ancient heat that needed no flame. Outside, the wind moaned, but it was a distant, unimportant sound. The cold would never get through again. Dawn crept over the mountains, spilling gold across the silent valley. The stone cabins stood unchanged, as if winter had never stormed at all. Frost lay thick on the outer stones, a glittering but impotent armor. The wall beneath was dry. Not a single crack had yielded. The air inside was still as a held breath. From the chimney of David's cabin, a thread of smoke rose into the lightening sky. Inside those walls, he had not added a log since midnight. The warmth was unbroken. He touched the inner stone. It was not cold, but living with the heat it had stored. Around the valley, other chimneys began to smoke. The lesson had spread, cabin by cabin. Some wisdom is so old, it's forgotten, until winter reminds us what the ancients knew. 2 walls, 1 fill. The cold never once got through, and it never would again.